Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System and designed to make navigating our scale-up journeys that little bit easier from learning by others' experiences. I'm Kevin Brent, and this week on the show, I'm joined by Alex Smith and Mike Penrose, the co-founders of the Sustainability Group. And they share their journey with FuturePlus, which is the main product within the group, a tool that's reshaping how companies approach sustainability. They share their approach to strategic growth to $1 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue, in an 18-month period, and their visionary path towards profitability, coming very shortly, and global impact. And from overcoming VC challenges to key hiring decisions and their unique fundraising approach, Alec and Mike offer some really invaluable insights for anybody listening, any entrepreneur. And make sure you don't miss any other episodes of ScaleUp Radio. Wherever you like to listen to your podcast, you can subscribe there, and you can also nominate a guest for ScaleUp Radio if you know someone with an interesting scale-up story, and you can find out how in the show notes. For now, tune in to Mike and Alex as we dive into their mission to build a sustainable future, the lessons that they've learned and the wisdom that they're eager to share. This really is a conversation packed with inspiration, strategy, and actionable advice for the sustainable entrepreneur in all of us. So let's get started. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm delighted today to be joined by Alex Smith and Mike Penrose, who are the co-founders of the Sustainability Group. So Mike and Alex, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you on board. And I'm really looking forward to finding out more about the Sustainability Group and FuturePlus. And I think you're a TEDx speaker as well, aren't you, Alex?
Both of us, actually.
Both of you?
Yeah,
right.
So me more recently, but Mike did one. I think you've done one or two, one in Melbourne and two, yeah. Two. So both of us have done a little bit of time on stage.
Brilliant. So we'll find out a bit more about that maybe in a minute. So the Sustainability Group, FuturePlus, I guess, is a little bit of a clue in there. So Mike, then what's it all about?
FuturePlus is the core product of the Sustainability Group, and the best way to describe what it is we're trying to do is to describe the problem we're trying to fix. Yeah. Which was when we were looking at the landscape that allowed any company, but particularly SMEs and startup scale-ups, to build sustainability into their business plan. We noticed that there were a few issues in terms of how support was provided. The first was that nearly every company out there was just measuring what they'd done. Right. It wasn't actually providing them with support to progress. And measuring's okay, but actually it's about how we improve and how we constantly build it into our business plan that's critical. The second part was that all measurement was done on historic action. And if you're a startup or a scale-up, the answer is you haven't done very much. Yeah. On top of, and you need the data to be able to participate in government tenders, to be able to get finance and etc. But also what we've done in the past doesn't really, it's important to benchmark and set a baseline, but it doesn't really matter compared to what you plan to do in the future. And when you're going out for money, everything's a financial projection, but ESG and sustainability was always measured on what you've done in the past. And the third problem is that then it just tended to be stamps of validation, which are great, but they didn't really tell you very much. And on top of that, I have a background in sociology. It's well known that when you provide someone with a goal where you then get a reward, they will achieve it and then they stop. They don't continue progress. So long story short, we developed FuturePlus, and FuturePlus is a system that allows companies to understand, so it's a baseline where they are in terms of sustainability and ESG, but then set objectives to where they want to be, get a score and a recognized score by finance and industry and ratings agencies based on your intention. And we think we're the only ones in the world that can actually quantify intent. Okay. And then it gives you all of the assistance you need to get to where it is that you've baselined yourself, but it's not get where you've set the objective. And so basically you can go out for finance, you can go out and work with companies, you can put in for government tenders, all based around where you want to be and what you expect to do.
Sounds great. So what sort of stage have you got the business to then? Maybe Alex, where are you on your scale up journey?
Yeah, so we launched FuturePlus a little over 2 years ago. And we now have a couple of hundred clients globally using it, from very, very small startups to some of the largest brands in the world that would be very recognizable. And the business and the team have grown in line with that. I think we are on a sort of one additional person a month at the moment, which we might not be able to continue all of this year, but that's the trend that we're seeing at the moment. And we're working with a variety of sectors, a variety of sizes, and a variety of geographies as well. As Mike said, we don't tell companies whether or not they are sustainable. What we tell them is where they are now, where they want to be in the future with working with them, and then how to get from point A to B. So it means that we are having the opportunity to work with a lot of emerging markets at the moment in the Caribbean, in the Middle East, in Asia, because there isn't a sort of a line in the sand or a pass or fail model. You don't have to have done X to work with us. What we're trying to get to is that constant improvement. So we're seeing some really interesting growth internationally. But as a company, we've been running since 2019. We're VC backed. So, we are looking for scale. It's something that we're focused on. And that comes from two sides. One, our investors and us are keen for the company to grow and for all of those good financial growth models. But also, fundamental to what we want to do is we wanted to make sustainability more accessible and more achievable, and we wanted to do it at scale. We wanted to take the complexity and the overwhelm away for a lot of companies in order to get onto the ladder and start to be more responsible, more just, more equitable, all the things they wanted to do, but give them the guidelines and the framework to do so. And in order to do that, you need scale. We want to work with as many companies, as many sizes, as many locations. So, we have our eye on, I don't think I'm allowed to say world domination, but, we would love to, we'd love to create enough change in enough companies that it did affect economies, that people were able to access that information and to be able to move forward in the right way for their business model.
And I think on that scale up journey, an important one, we're hitting some milestones at the moment. So we are this quarter, if we haven't already, because we've got some more signups that come in today, but this quarter we'll do the million ARR in retained revenue and in SaaS-based revenue, which obviously is a big milestone. And we should hit profitability, we think, by Q4 this year.
Very good, which is incredibly rapid, isn't it, for something like
18 months from the end of MVP to million ARR and probably 2 years to profitability.
Very good, because I imagine the platform was not insignificant from a cost point of view.
Yep, we're VC backed as well as multiple private investors. So we have two VCs and multiple private investors, and it cost a fair amount to develop. Yeah.
So how does the business model work?
So we are a SaaS platform, or the FuturePlus is a SaaS platform. So it's a 12-month membership, and it is priced for what we do as affordably as possible. We're, again, back to the foundations of what we want to do about making it accessible. We also wanted to make it affordable. So if you're a company of less than 50 staff, we are a couple of £100 a month, $250 a month. So we wanted, and that comes with the ability to manage, measure, report, but also access support and advice from a FuturePlus advisor that is your account manager. So importantly, a human to speak to and say, this is our very particular circumstances. How, what would you advise? And we, as I say, we're sector, size and geography agnostic, so we can work with companies. And then we also have a consultancy arm to the business as well, which is the smaller part of the business, but a really important part for us as well to keep us at the forefront of what we're doing. And we do a little bit of consultancy on social and environmental impact projects that are all underpinned by the same FuturePlus methodology. And that methodology is that whenever we're looking at any sustainability issues, we look at it under the 5 themes that we have within FuturePlus, which is climate, environment, social, economic, and diversity and inclusion. And then we also look at governance, leadership, workforce, supply chain, ecosystem, carbon footprinting, manufacturing, and the global goals. So it really is end to end of a business, looking at the communities that businesses operate in, the communities they operate to, and the communities they operate from. So we're sort of a full, holistic, comprehensive package within FuturePlus, with the support of that consultancy on top as well, if needed.
Very good. And what does the competitive landscape look like for you?
It's an interesting one, competitors, because nobody does what we do in terms of quantification of intent. So we put competitors into 3 baskets. First of all, nearly all our consultancy is just done for FuturePlus clients. And as Alex said, it is an ability to first of all, not leave the cherry off the cake. So we've got a lot of clients who set all these objectives, we help them achieve it, but then they come back with big projects. And obviously we wanted that as well, but it helps us constantly learn and improve the situation. So you have consultancies, but nearly everything they provide is bespoke. So therefore it's not comparable. It doesn't really provide a learning environment, the data environment to help entire economies improve. The second one is the sort of ESG measurement platforms. But as I said, all of them sort of only measures, you've got things like EcoVadis, which is one of the biggest ones, but they only measure historic action. They only tell you what you've done. Mm-hmm. And they tend to be very issue specific. So you'll have one for the environment, one for climate, one for diversity and inclusion. When we look at climate, environment, diversity and inclusion, economic and social indicators, because there's a huge amount of linkages between them. And the third are these sort of badges of validation, these certifications, which, as I said, are great from a marketing perspective, but they're not particularly transparent. They don't really show you what's behind them. And that means we often advise it leaves you quite open to accusations of greenwashing, because you're telling people you're sustainable, but you can't really back it up with much detail or not immediately. And because it's only based on previous action, as Alex said today at the talk you were giving, if you're doing it every 3 years and you're looking at improvement from something that was measured 3 years ago, and some of that data was a year and a half old, sometimes you're looking back 4.5 years to try and validate your operations today rather than looking forward, as you would do with financial projections. So certifications to a certain extent, ESG measurement platforms to a certain extent, but we've talked about their limitations, but we also do the consultancy as well.
Okay. And you mentioned some of the economic advantages, but what other, if I'm a small business owner or medium-sized business owner and I'm sort of want to be doing the right thing, but I'm not necessarily a passionate advocate of it, what are the economic reasons why I would want to do it?
Well, nearly every finance sort of especially ESG and venture capital firm now asks you to provide evidence that you're taking it into consideration. And we're one of the most cost effective because we price according to size of organization. So if you're under 50 staff, for all the assistance, all the guidance, everything, it's a couple of £100 a month for this. If you're much bigger, obviously we charge you more. It's also then making you ESG mature, because if you are scaling up, if you are looking at Series B, Series C, pre-IPO, and taking your business there, they're going to expect you to have 3 to 4 years of validated, third-party validated data on how you've integrated sustainability. You can't do it 6 months before you're going out for a Series B, right? Because when you're getting to that level of funding, most of the end providers of the cash, the LPs to the LPs, are the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the CalPERS, Ontario pension funds, Aviva, the really big pots of cash. And they demand really good, verifiable, mature ESG data. And on top of that, we have a whole raft of evidence now that shows that looking at sustainability means you're taking a 5 to 10 year perspective on things, which builds maturity into your system. It makes you normally more resilient as a business. Certainly in terms of getting employees. If you want the youngest and the smartest, we always use ourselves as an example. Our average cost per recruitment is £180. Wow. We put an advert out on LinkedIn and we get Oxbridge graduates, top universities from all around the world. We'll normally leave it open for 4 to 5 days. We'll have 300 to 400 applicants, and half of them are employable. So it really shows the desire to work for companies with purpose. And in terms of participation in the future in government tenders, large company tenders, supply chain measurement, any of this, again, they're going to expect data maturity. It's not something you can implement last minute. They want to know that you've built it in from the beginning. And we say for a couple of £100 a month, it's really worthwhile doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you say, even for businesses that aren't necessarily on a VC-backed large-scale scale-up journey, just simply those local tenders. If you're looking for a publicly funded program of any sort, they've always got a question in there, haven't they, about your social responsibility.
But also with the coming legislation on Scope 3 emissions, if you want to work for a firm that is working for a big FMCG firm, a big government tender provider, a large multinational. They're all going to, because the Scope 3 Emissions Social Values Act cascades the responsibility down the supply chain. You're going to have to provide it.
Very good.
Yeah, even at the very base of sustainability, what we're looking for at the first stage really is have an understanding of what you're using and the efficiencies around that. So actually, could you reduce your waste, which will reduce your cost? Can you reduce your energy, which will reduce your cost? And in a sort of cost of living crisis that's affecting businesses as well, it's the first sort of port of call, if you like, is to have a better understanding of the things that you can manage and can reduce, which will be better for your sustainability, but also better for your bottom line. And then there's all those other things around tenders, around recruitment, around keeping employees, having an understanding that sustainability isn't just about one thing, but running your business more responsibly, which tends to lead to better outcomes for your business. It starts to wrap up into a really solid sort of commercial idea. There is so much sustainability data out there, but there's not a huge amount of sustainability intelligence. And as we're collecting that future-focused data, what is it that you want to do? When do you want to do it? What did you do? And how did you do it? What we're looking to do is to turn that sort of data through analysis into intelligence and insights, help companies then understand the decisions that they should be making, but more importantly, align that sustainable growth with financial growth and be able to prove the classic question. There are two things that everyone asks. What is good? Which is a really interesting question to ask because it's quite complicated to answer because it's very subjective. But there are some really interesting ways to answer that. And we try to look at that on a balanced scorecard, but also what is the ROI on sustainability? And that's the other thing that we want to go back to companies and say, look, this growth has happened for your financial growth and your sustainable growth. But actually, we can start to map what that looks like by having this future-focused data over a period of time. But everything so far, as Mike has said, has been historical data, and you can't necessarily do that with that data. But our plan is to be able to align that ROI on why sustainability, as well as what is good.
And I love the idea of building in the future side of things as well. How do you control, if we commit to doing all this stuff and we get whatever rating and that's 3 years time, we say, but what if I don't do it? Or what if, what happens then?
It's a SaaS-based solution, so you're a member of ours. You can only use that score as long as you pay your monthly fee and you have a membership basis. Quite so low. But when you achieve something, you have to upload it and we will validate it. And we spot check, and we have an entire team whose entire job is evidence verification and validation. So if you get your scores, you can widget it onto your website, provide links, all sorts, and it's real time. And if you do not meet an objective, your score goes down. If you keep kicking your objectives back, your score goes down. So it's like a rating score. You can log on any given day and watch whether somebody has made loads of pledges and then not achieve them, because the score will go up and then it will start down again.
Okay, very good.
To give a little bit of context to FuturePlus. So at its very simplest, and it is much bigger than this, but all good things start with something simple, is an assessment for businesses to go through, that they go through those 5 themes and answer questions around, do you do this? And they can answer, yes, I do, and upload evidence, or they can answer, no, I don't. And if they say no, our next question is, would you like to? Would you like to set this an ambition? And they get to say yes or no, and then within timeframes of 3 months to 3 years. We then verify all of the evidence, and that allows us to give an actual score, everything that you have done, what you've has been verified, and an ambition score, which is a weighted score on all of the things that you've said that you would like to get to. What that produces from there is all of the indicators that you said that you would like to achieve, we can put into a roadmap, which is the plan that you have from 3 months to 3 years of all the things that you'd like to do. And then people work with our advisors to get from point A to point B. So we often advise, say, you put 72 ambitions in 3 months. We're super stoked how ambitious you are, but we don't think you're going to get it done. Actually, let's move this out and start to make this a real world strategy that you can start to implement into the business that is actually achievable. But if you then don't meet those ambitions, as Mike said, your ambition score will drop. If you do meet those ambitions, the evidence is verified, and then your actual score goes up, and you can go back in, relook at your ambitions and use it as a day-to-day real world management of the improvements that you're making over time. And then within that, to make sure that people don't play the system. There are things like anti-gaming algorithms, so if you keep pushing something back regularly. But we also, the question set itself, the assessment is living and breathing. So every time that new regulation, new precedent, new innovation, new expectation, new trends starts to come up, we update the question set and provide new questions. So we're constantly moving the goalposts, and that's really important because sustainability is consistently moving. As we learn new things, it's important that we're then applying that to the question so that people know what's coming up. They might not be doing it at any particular point in time, but it's really important to know that in the future they may need to consider it.
Brilliant. So what got you both into this in the first place?
We were having this conversation earlier. I was trying to think of the first thing I sort of did in a company that counted as sustainability. I used to work for Terence Conran's restaurant group, which is now D&D London. And when I first started in my early 20s, there was diesel vans that used to truck the mail between restaurants. And I went in and suggested that we got these shiny new cars called Toyota Priuses because they were hybrid. And this was before sort of email had been transitioned into all the restaurants, which, as I mentioned to Mike earlier, probably ages me quite considerably. Yeah. And sort of that was my first sort of seeing a problem and thinking there's probably a solution to this. But then I worked in hospitality for 10 years, helped set up the Sustainable Restaurant Association about 15 years ago, and then worked in sports and saw how sport could be used as a mechanism and as a vehicle for social and environmental impact, and what that looked like, and something that really encouraged me to keep learning and going into it. And Mike and I met about 4 years ago through sailing, despite the fact that neither of us sail or are particularly good at it, and started talking about how complex and the complexity around sustainability. And that it didn't need to be like that, that there were all these mechanisms and tools and knowledge and education that if it could just be translated and communicated properly, that the finance world could use it, that organizations that could use it, that we could start to really create something quite interesting, especially with this ambition piece of having people look forward. And that's where we got to on my side. Mike's story is a little bit different, I'd say.
So prior to setting this up, I was the chief executive of UNICEF. And before that, the chief executive of Action contre la faim, Action Against Hunger, which is one of France's biggest not-for-profits. That's pretty much the world leader in the treatment of undernutrition and malnutrition in humanitarian contexts. But I spent about 24 years in the humanitarian sector, working in every crisis, probably since the Rwandan genocide, which ages me more than Alex. And I also was on the ESG advisory committee of the London Stock Exchange, the FTSE for Good. And I helped advise a group called the SDSN, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, in the run-up to launching of the Sustainable Development Goals, where I helped contextualize the indicators to humanitarian contexts. So it was very much about setting goals around how the world could improve and then translating that back to how that can be created in individual businesses or organizations or plans or strategies. But the majority of my life was in the humanitarian sector.
Great. So very, very strong backgrounds. I can see why a venture capital firm might want to invest in you. So tell us through some of the challenges then, maybe to do with the VC side of things, or what have been some of the key challenges that you've faced along the way so far?
I think early on, and this will be familiar to any VC-backed organization, is getting attention, is getting enough time in front of people to explain why you're different, to demonstrate your credentials, and just demonstrate that you had a viable idea rather than just, I can sympathize with them a little bit. When we work for a lot of VCs now because we do data consolidation for the finance industry, and we work with them, and they get hundreds of applications. So getting that initial spark, and for any organization still looking for VC funding, it's about making yourself stand out. What's different to the pack rather than why are you good within a pack? And that was where the quantification intent stood out. And I would say also then, sorting the wheat from the chaff when it comes to VCs, because Many of them are not that easy to work with, and they promise a lot, deliver not much. This is some of them, but some of them are extremely good. We have some excellent partners, but we did find that one of the biggest challenges when it came to sustainability in the finance sector was that there seems to be this search for a silver bullet. They want something that is easy to deploy, doesn't really cost anything, and that solves all the problems in terms of relating complex indicators around socioeconomic, climate, and environmental issues to financial outcomes that you can do by pushing a button. And there are solutions out there that purport to do it, but the trouble is that they don't really. That you can't. Well, the best example we use on that is, there are systems that will say we'll scan your spreadsheet and tell you your carbon footprint. But a good example we use is when you book a train ticket from where Alex lives, near Southampton, up to London, and you book it 3 weeks in advance and you travel on a Wednesday afternoon, it's sort of 30, 40 quid. If you book it at 8:50 on a Monday morning to travel immediately, it's 130 quid. Yeah. And so that delta is £100 worth of value. And all a spreadsheet can tell you is how much you spend on train travel. So getting people to understand that in a pithy, immediate message and why your solution is different and why it does sometimes take a little bit of effort. So I think in terms of VC funding, it was getting that message across. And then when you could to VCs, finding the ones that could actually help you, not just the ones who wanted a lot of equity for not much money and then drove you too hard so you didn't actually have time to develop your product.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that Mike and I aren't techies in terms of we don't code and we've never built a tech product before. So there was both the going into VCs and tell them that that's what we were going to do and getting them to have the trust and the confidence that not only did we know what we were talking about in regards to sustainability, but that we were competent enough to build a tech product. And actually, I do think there have been some real benefits of not having that tech background because we have taken everything as a user first mentality. What is it that somebody who's using this day in, day out, or, over a period of year, what's going to be their experience of it as opposed to what is the most technically efficient way to have built it, so to speak. We had a few robust discussions with our web dev team, I would say, over the period of time. They'd say, we're going to do it like this. We're like, but that's not what we want. Unfortunately, it's over here. But that, if you built it, this is what it would look like. And we go, that's absolutely brilliant. And it will need to do that, but it needs to look like this. And it needs to work like that. And this is how it needs to function. And I think it's one of the things that has been a huge challenge in the beginning. But one of the things that we're proudest about is that the main feedback that we get around the platform is its ease to use, the intuitive design, and the ability to progress through it really comfortably, that it's not overwhelming, that people don't get to it and see that classic sort of finance dashboard or tech dashboard where there's so much going on that you've no idea what that button does or who, it's very, very simple. So yeah, both a challenge and actually something that's worked out really, really well for us, although we're going through another huge development phase at the moment. And that's, we're learning all of the time as to around everything that the tech world's required and our tech stack that we're putting together. And it's fantastically exciting, but also can be, somewhat overwhelming sometimes.
Is that an internal development team? I'm taking it. You built that internally?
It's a mixture. So we have our own chief technology officer. We have technical people inside, but because what we're building now is an ecosystem of different tools, they have different teams around the place who will build it, and then we bolt things together and work. But we felt it essential, and also again for getting funding, people like to have a really strong internal chief technology officer. Yeah. That because when you are not techies, they will sell you something that looks technologically advanced, but doesn't actually solve the problem you're trying to fix. You need somebody that can translate between the two.
Yeah. So were they your first key hire? Who are the key hires along the way so far?
So CTO has been a big one, and has a really incredible background with what he does and how he does, and has a very commercial view of technology, which has been really key to us, as well as somebody that understands both sides of it, and as Mike said, can translate. I think other key hires, our first employee, Polly, who is our project director, is absolute gold dust. And we tell her on a regular basis that she is such, to make sure that she knows. We always wanted the two rules when we sort of started the company was we wanted to build a company that we would want to work for. And as we grew, we wanted people to come with us. And I think Polly is probably a really good example of that, and has taken on the role with an incredible flourish and really added something really special to the team in terms of the leadership of the management, how she works with our clients, and has been a real foundation for us as we go out and do all of those sort of really good founder things like raise money, which takes you away from the business and uses a huge amount of time and resources. And we know that it's in incredibly safe hands when we're not there, when Polly's at the helm.
So I think, anybody who's doing, especially a SaaS-based, a CTO, because you need, the tech has to work, it has to be good, it has to be seamless, and a COO, somebody who can, because founders will know, if Alex and I are not talking to our investors, we're talking to the biggest possible clients. So we're either in sales mode or we're doing the money in the accounts, or we're talking to investors. And just as you come out the end of one fundraising round, the next one begins. So getting people who can make the ship run and make the machine go ping, those would be the most essential.
Great. And how have you, and I guess that you've part answered that now, because my next question is going to be, how have you managed to bridge that strategy, the gap between strategy and execution? Because it's especially scaling so quickly as you've done, to keep control of things while keeping on track with the strategy. So you mentioned you've got the COO.
I think with that, it's one area where I was lucky, because obviously some of the organizations I ran before were substantial, and the largest had thousands of employees, is you learn very quickly that strategy needs to be applicable, practical from the outset. If it is just theoretical, if it is just the problem you're trying to solve, and it doesn't already translate it down to how, then it's a vision. It's not actually a strategy for delivery. So Alex and I spent 18 months before we launched our first product, making sure that the data science was solid, that the product development was well designed and rolled out, that our scaling capacity was well thought out. Because then it means that because as long as you've written it clearly, you can pass it down and it can be easily executable. Where we see sort of peer organizations, not in the same sector, but ones we work with, struggle, it's because they've got a great vision, but they haven't done that jump from idea through to actual practice and thought, I've always push the idea that a strategy should have a 5-year vision, a 3-year implementation plan, and a 1-year tactical plan. And it needs to contain all three. Otherwise, it's going to be a real problem to implement, especially, and this is where I'll give credit to Alex, when she's got to put up with a CEO who's used to having a chief of staff, an EA, a board, a CEO's office, and has long forgotten that things actually don't just get said, they get done. If you haven't designed a strategy that way, then you end up with people like me who can't figure out why I've said I need a new mobile phone and it hasn't arrived. So.
Brilliant. Good. So
he's still waiting.
Yeah. So you're in a very data-driven business. You're VC backed, so they're wanting all sorts of KPIs from you. What are the key numbers that you track as a SaaS business to know whether you're on the right track?
Signups, revenue, data points as well. So what we are planning on building is what we'd like to build is the world's largest data lake, and we think we're well on the way for ESG data. And it goes back to that conversation around that analysis and then into intelligence as well. But we capture a huge amount of data from all of the organizations that we work with, who they are, where they are in the world, the size they are, their, the ability to capture their funding status. But as I said, also what it is that they've done with how they did it, what they'd like to do, when they'd like to do it, how they did it, and what they did it with. And then we are at the moment, the future for that is what, back to that, what does good look like? How do we improve on that, and how do we take it forward? So there's the data side, and then as a business, it's all about those growth metrics in order to make sure that we get to that sort of scale, and we get to access all of those companies that we know that we could potentially help and improve their sustainability and their impact in the communities that they work with.
And I think within those business metrics, especially, and we can talk from a SaaS-based platform, SaaS-based businesses, when you get the model right, can be incredibly profitable when you pass that point of inflection where, costs go up at one level, revenue goes up at another, but when it passes, it can, the delta between the two can grow very rapidly. But absolutely essential to crack early on is an understanding of staff time per client, because you want to keep staff numbers low and signups high, the net margin that you gain per client within that, so you can very precisely put that point of inflection and the point where revenue crosses expense, and monitor it, because it's very easy to go out there and give enterprise discounts, for example. Of course, if somebody comes to us and says, we want to use your portfolio system and we need 100 licenses, we'll give a discount. But you need to make sure that discount, especially if it's through third parties have referred on, doesn't eat your margin down to effectively earning you nothing, because that's the point that the VCs start going, data fantastic, you'll realize huge value from that in 15 years. But I want to exit in 5. So I want to know what your revenue is. So the sort of cost per client, cost of acquisition, profitability per client, staff time, and therefore net margin per client, and at what point you become profitable.
And presumably somewhere in there is the churn rate.
Oh, exactly. Churn rate is a good point. It's really important. And that, going back to some of the things we talked before, a lot of our design has been around stickiness, because we help, the system goes into all points of the business. We're helping the HR, we're helping the operations, we're helping the others. It's really important to look at that stickiness and to keep your churn rate low. We're lucky that ours is under 5%. So
yeah. And if it's important to me to be able to demonstrate that I'm doing all of these good things, and if I stop paying you the subscription and I lose that evidence base, that's a bit of a challenge for me.
I think also, if you're in a change-based business, don't be afraid to have minimum terms. It's it's required, because you can't demonstrate value in a week or a month. Nearly every SaaS-based business, you sign up for 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, and it's really important to stick to that, because you will get people who sign up and then go, I've changed my mind, and you staff according to the number of signups you've got. And if you set a good system up, you're tracking that and really monitoring it, and allowing people just to pull out because you're a good person, etc. Actually, all of a sudden you realize that profitability gets kicked back 6 months, 1 year, because people, you need to set the minimum terms, you need to be clear about them, and then you need to hold people to them. But luckily our churn rate, as I said, of 5% a year is really low. But
yeah, very good. And can you give us, for those of us that maybe 1 or 2 tips for those of us out there listening to this that are thinking, I want to go down the VC route. How much am I going to have to give away of my business? What are they going to hold me to, and how are they going to value the business? Whatever. What are some of the key things you'd suggest we should think about?
I'll hand over to Alex to a lot, because she dealt with it, but I have one particular one, and it's a shout out to our fundraising advisor. We held off on the first fundraise. There's a guy called Ashish, and we held off on the first fundraise because we didn't want to give any money to somebody else that we raised. There are lots of people out there that we came across that were offering us the world to go and fundraise for us for a margin. And we've heard some horror stories, but we were very lucky to come across someone who is absolutely amazing and just takes so much weight off Alex and I for actually going out, because they make sure they're FCA regulated, ours is. So they will not lie. They cannot bluff and bluster. They have to tell you the truth, and they have to present the truth, but they know how to ensure that you get the right valuation, which is essential. The way you don't give up equity is getting the right valuation, making sure people value your model. Our last fundraise was on a 19 million valuation, and it's all evidence-based and revenue projections and etc. And somebody who knows how to do that will earn their weight in gold. So you might end up paying a few tens of thousands of pounds on £1 million raise, but if they can, get triple, quadruple upraise on EBITDA projections, then it's worth it in terms of holding on to it. And don't be afraid to say no to VCs that walk in. So many try to play games with us. Luckily, the ones we've got are great, and we work with some fabulous VCs, but we've learned to be selective because many will come in, try and drive you down, play all sorts of games with you, agree on a valuation, and then on the last day turn around and go, oh no, we've just changed our model, so actually we're going to downgrade it, but you still, we want more equity for the cash. Don't be afraid to, if you're confident in your business model, don't be afraid to tell them to go and do one.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I join Mike in saying having an advisor has been really, really helpful, just unbelievably helpful. And I think part of that, depending on how much experience you have, if it's your first time going to VC, I mean, it is a different world, it is a different language. And I think it's incredibly important to start to understand about that world and about that language. And I think you kind of have to immerse yourself, as no matter what your industry is, you need to immerse yourself in the finance industry, and you need to read about it. You need to turn up and speak and listen to people speak about it. You go on Investopedia and start looking up terms and how it's used. I joke, only half jokingly, there was a BBC series about the finance industry. It was a drama series about 4 years ago. And I genuinely watched about 2 series of it to see how they were using language in conversation with each other, because for me it was a new world. I got to grips with the very basics of it, but actually if you're going to go in and you're giving away equity in the business that you're building, you need to understand the nuance of the language, the terminology that's used, the phrasing. And I still get tripped up because it is there are so many uses of language and words and nuance, like legal or any other sort of industry, that if you don't understand it, you can spend so much time not agreeing to something or thinking you're agreeing to something that isn't actually quite what it is. So I think it's so important to really immerse yourself in that. And it's not something that I learned at school, that I think a lot of people learn or is sort of handed down. So I think really immersing yourself in is that as much as you can through webinars, workshops, turn up, join networks that give you access to VCs. And the other thing is be protective of your time. It's really hard, as Mike said, to say no to a deal when you're in a deal, but actually even those early stages, it can be easier to get a meeting with someone at VC that isn't a decision maker. And sometimes you see that as a step into it, but actually sometimes if you're giving an hour away of your time, 3 to 4 times a week, over a period of 3 to 4 months of a fundraise, that is such a vast quantity of time that you are pitching yourself to people that aren't actually the people that are going to be able to take you forward. So really do your research on who you're speaking to, what industries they're investing in, if they've got any competitors in their VC within their portfolio, that they may not go to, but they're looking for information. There are brilliant VCs out there, but there are also, you've got to be really cautious with your time. Because I think after our first fundraise, we did really, it wasn't particularly hard. And I think we were like, oh, this is, isn't so bad. And then the second fundraise that we did, we were like, this is a little bit harder, and we probably need to. And it used up a vast quantity of our time, and it put us off sort of fundraising a little bit because of the amount of time and resources. There's a huge quantity of things. There was the economy, there was COVID, that were all sort of happening at that time. But getting Ashish in, having that advisor and immersing ourselves in that world meant that we were in a much, much better place, and are in a better place now with the experience to really understand what it is that we're asking for, how we should ask for it, the sort of equity levels. It really is an education piece that I think is vital before you start going out and having those conversations.
Very good. And how much of my business am I going to have to be prepared to give away?
Depends how much money you want.
Give away as little as possible. There's a real trend that we found right in the early days that people were sort of bragging about the amount of money that they'd raised. And it became almost like, they've raised 2 million or they've raised 500,000. It's, why aren't we doing that much? And what we realized is we didn't need that much. We've been revenue generating from sort of quite early on. But actually the advice we were given and we were taking and we realized was that we we don't need to raise any more than we need to raise. Yeah. We need a healthy cash runway. We need the ability to invest in the things that to grow the business, but we do not need to go out with massive fundraising totals if that's not where we are as a business. And we still hold between the two of us a majority share in the business. And that's really important because our intention is to fundraise in the future. So I think not falling into that trap of thinking bigger is always better.
Yeah. And I know fundraising takes time, but what Alex and I did it is in small bite-sized pieces, but then demonstrated growth. So we went out for a bit, but only what we needed for the next year or so, and then demonstrated growth. So then we went out for the same amount again. We doubled our valuation, which means you gave half as much equity. Yeah. And our latest one, so we went from a 3.5 million valuation at concept and minimum viable product to 19 now in 2 years, which means we're going out for £1 million now, which we just closed valuation on a 19 million valuation. Yeah. You're talking a couple of percentage where you're not going for big chunks of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So that plays absolutely Alex's point about not going for too much too early on, because that's the most expensive equity that you're going to funding that you're going to have, isn't it? Very good. Okay, so I could carry on asking you questions forever. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I need to be respectful of your time. Is there any other key lessons that you want to share that maybe I haven't teased out of you yet? Any one or two key points that you'd like to share? Mike?
I think a really key one is being a founder can be a really lonely place. Having a co-founder is very valuable, because having somebody that you can lock yourself away with and go, what the hell? How are we going to do this is enormously important. And the second, and Alex has talked about key hires, but making sure taking so much time in your early days and incentivizing the first people you bring on correctly, even if that's in options, which is what we did, is so important, because they, as I said, when you get into that loop of having to spend all your time on fundraising, sales, and etc., making sure that those first key hires are good, loyal, decent, hardworking, and really buy into your vision is priceless.
Brilliant. Thank you. Alex?
I think, but back to the list that Mike was just going through: sales, fundraising, admin, marketing, HR. I just heard someone describe running a startup scale up once as standing on a different precipice every morning and seeing how far you could tilt over it. And I just thought that was such a brilliant description of sort of every day. And I think that's, having an expectation of that's what you do, and that's sometimes what you do in the morning. And I agree with what Mike said about having a co-founder. I'd be terrified to do this, I think, solo, and anyone that does do it solo, hats off to them, because sometimes you do need to go and say, WTF or celebrate is the other one. And maybe that's what my final is remember to celebrate, and it doesn't have to be big milestones. We have we continue to try to find small things that mean the business has moved on. We've run out of seats in our office with our last hire. We've got nowhere else to sit people, and so it means we're going to need a bigger boat. And that's actually a real milestone. We moved into that office. It was way too big for us. There was 4 of us, and we were like, I don't think we're going to need all 16 seats for a little while. But, and actually now when we've got everybody in, those seats are taken. So having those milestones and those celebrations and taking the moment to appreciate, it's very hard when you're in the moment and you're doing all of those things every day to really see how much a business has grown and the steps and the milestones that you've taken over that period of time. So yeah, I'd say take a second, turn around, appreciate and celebrate with your co-founder or your team as and when it's necessary.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And what does the next 5 years hold? What if we're meeting up in 5 years' time? What does success look like?
We're turning FuturePlus from what is now FuturePlus, so the platform that helps you understand, measure, manage, improve, and report your sustainability, into an ecosystem. So we've learnt lots of things that clients want. So we're providing a marketplace for our customers to sort of present their sustainable products and solutions to other companies who work with us. We are looking at things like materiality, due diligence, an enhanced supply chain tool, and all of this. So we're building it into an ecosystem that will still feed the same data lake, but you'll get much more refined intelligence out of it. Obviously, we said initially we became accidentally international because we suddenly work with clients who are overseas, but we're now on every continent on Earth except Antarctica. And we are pushing, especially we found that because our solution is very affordable in emerging markets, we've become suddenly we're quite big in the Caribbean now, and we've got clients in Asia. So we think we're probably towards the end of this year have our first 1 or 2 international offices, representative offices out there. And then, what we're hoping is within 3 years, the refinement of the data we've got will be the world's first sustainability intelligence platform, because we are the only ones that measure what you want to do and how you've managed to achieve it. It's the same as financial intelligence. We'll be able to tell you the optimum pathways to achieve what you want. Historic data can't give you that. It's only when you look forward and measure attainment against objective and measure what it is that achieves the outcome you want to do that you can actually start providing intelligence. And so we hope it will go from just being the assistance and reporting platform to being the thing that the market uses to check whether people are on the right path.
Fantastic.
I think just working with growing it and making it so accessible that there's a real joy that comes. There's all the commercial, the financial, the scaling, and what's important for investors and what our hopes and dreams are for the business. But I will say there's an absolute joy of seeing what we're doing, working in businesses and changing how they're operating in order to do so more sustainably. And I think that's what we originally went in at the very early stages of wanting to do it at scale, but actually being able to take those little snippets of stories and understand if people turn around going, I don't think we could have done this without you. And now we're doing this and we've reduced it by that. And this is we whether it be inclusion or, whether it be how they've changed their policies to make their maternity sort of a little bit better, or they've reduced their carbon, reduced their waste, they've saved money, they've won a contract because of how we helped them, which has helped grow their business. I think collecting all of those stories over the next 5 years, and knowing that something that we sort of put our heart and soul into in the early days of COVID around a dining room table is now something that's fully functioning out in the world and actually making a little bit of a difference.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, Mike Penrose and Alex Smith, thank you very much indeed for being my guests today on ScaleUp Radio. If somebody would like to get hold of you or find out more about FuturePlus, what's the best way for them to do that?
www.future-plus.co.uk.
Fantastic.
And within that, you can talk to us, chat to us, ring us, get anything you need, and we can help you.
Or find us on LinkedIn. We're content every day on LinkedIn, so always there to chat to and to check out what we've been doing as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for being my guest today.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for having us.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.